I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
In many corners of the world, there are now a whole range of indigenous travel experiences. And of course, and I'm talking about not just some dreadful folklore show or going to see some people dressed up in a costume and, putting on a bit of an act for the tourists. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about proper, meaningful, authentic experiences with Indigenous people.
That is Lyn Hughes, today's guest. She is the founding editor of Wanderlust magazine, the #1 travel magazine in the UK. It's been operating since 1993. You can check them out over at wanderlustmagazine.com. They do incredible work, and as you'll hear today, even after all these years, she is still as passionate as ever about the power of travel, which I love. Lyn is a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. She's regularly consulted on travel-related issues, and the Times named her one of the 50 most influential people in travel. And for over 3 decades, it's been her job to stay on top of travel trends. In this episode, she reveals 7, including some expert insights that can help you perhaps plan the direction of your travels in the next year or two. We're also going to talk about emerging destinations, some more natural ways to add health and wellness into your travels, and so much more. Plus, I've got something special for you today. You're going to hear a little extra bonus segment, which is going to be the beginning of your mystery road trip. I'll tell you what that's all about in this episode, and much more happening right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey there, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience, as we continue a month of travel trends, the big focus here. And I was so excited to bring you this one. I thought, who could I talk to about trends who's been on the cutting edge for decades? And that is, of course, Lyn Hughes, today's guest. And like all great businesses, Wanderlust magazine was sketched out on the back of an air sickness bag on a flight home from a trip. You're going to hear that story. Lyn has since sold the magazine, but she has remained on as the founding editor. And I was excited to have her on because I think her travel philosophy is very much aligned with this community in terms of, helping people connect with local culture, having more authentic travel experiences. So I'm excited to dig into these 7 trends she shares with you today. And a little bit of surprise, as I mentioned at the top, a bonus segment. This is the first segment that you'll hear in a series called Road Trip Planning Guide. It's a mini series I'm putting together for you. And the cool thing about it is it's going to culminate in you planning an epic road trip in the coming year. So I want you to get pumped because the idea here is that there's some mystery road trip waiting for you in the future. And over the next few weeks, even though you don't know where you're going to be going yet or how you're going to get there, the goal is to give you, through these segments, some inspiration, some advice, some perspectives, some destination ideas to help you plan an unexpected and unforgettable road trip in the coming year. So you might have something on the books, but really my intention here, this is all about helping you add more travel into your life, right? And so I thought with this segment series coming at you in the next weeks, you should stay tuned and really set that intention to be like, hey, by the end of these, I'm going to plan a road trip and maybe do it in a little bit of a different way, or maybe something unexpected, something you didn't really think about. And it'll be interesting to see as an experiment how this works. You'll have to give me your feedback. Let me know what you end up planning, where you end up going. And yeah, I always love to hear from the community. Speaking of which, last thing before we dive into the interview, if you want to further connect with the community here, you can sign up for a newsletter. It's free. It's over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. Again, totally free. And if you have any stories you want to share or anything at all with the community, just reach out. I've been getting some nice emails and going to continue to share some wins from the community and just some of those stories over at the newsletter there and here on the podcast, which I love. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. A lot coming at you right now. Buckle up, and I'll see you on the other side. Cheers. I'm so excited to welcome to the show for the first time the founder of Wanderlust magazine. You got to check him out over at wanderlustmagazine.com. Here to share some of the big trends for the coming year and get you ahead of the curve. Lyn Hughes, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. It's been a long time coming.
Hi, Jason. Oh, gosh, this is such an honor. Do you know what? Yours was probably one of the first podcasts I ever really got into. And
Wow.
I just sometimes, if I'm on a plane or something, I've downloaded it and really, really love it. Yeah.
That is so sweet, and I'm getting chills because I've been following your work for quite some time, and you guys, Wanderlust magazine, for people that don't know, this is the UK's longest running travel magazine and the largest. It's independently owned. You guys do some amazing stuff. It's an award-winning magazine. It's been around seemingly forever, and you still do the print magazines, which I love. And of course, I encourage people to sign up. I share a lot of links to your articles via our newsletter and stuff like that, because you do such high quality stuff. It all started from my research on the back of a sick bag on an air flight to South America. And so, before we get into this list of trends and everything, I do want to learn a little bit more about that, because what have you learned from an idea on the back of a throw-up bag on a flight to becoming an award-winning travel publication, the UK's largest? It's hard to unpack lessons from decades of growth.
I'm not going to answer that in a minute or two. What have I learned? Oh, gosh. I still feel a true amateur. I was involved for many years in a publishing association in the UK, and I felt I needed to be involved in it because I felt a complete amateur at publishing, for instance. But when that was my late husband and myself, originally had this idea on the plane. We were talking about why were there no travel magazines. We were desperate to read one, and we knew there had been a couple. We'd come across some, and they hadn't lasted very long. But we really felt that there was a need for it. So it certainly wasn't a kind of a business decision, as in this is something we could do, from that point of view. It was more of there isn't a travel magazine. We would love a travel magazine. So, hey, if nobody else is doing it, why don't we do it? But we knew nothing about publishing, nothing about how to do a magazine. So we had to go on a very steep learning curve. And so one of the first things I did when we got back to the UK was I bought lots of magazines and literally had them all over the living room floor and analysed them. And I really got to understand. And when we told people what we were doing, we did actually get friends offer to invest in us, and we said no because we don't know what we're doing. We are completely amateur. So it's just this feeling we've got, and it's just something that the idea just grabbed us. And I think what we did know is that we just had this incredible passion for travel. We were curious about the world. We loved exploring the world. And we knew that there were other people who felt the same way. So what we wanted to do was therefore share our feelings and try and have a fairly kind of inclusive magazine as well, where the other people reading it would also feel that they were able to contribute to it in some way. And so that was very much our ethos from the start. And so when you say, to go back to the question, what have I learned over these the 3 decades, because it's now 31 years, so we're into the 4th decade, that feeling of travel, that feeling of wanderlust is still very much there. And when I meet people, when I meet readers out and about, they still get that light in their eye when we talk about travel and where they've been, where they're thinking of going. And that love, that buzz, that passion, that curiosity about the world is as strong as ever. And so what is a joy now is that over all those years, there are even more people now reading the magazine, and there are also more ways to communicate to our kind of people via the website, via our podcast, via our social media. And so I do believe in what they call the Wanderlust gene, that people have got it in them. And there's some people who haven't, and they like to go on a holiday and mosey around. That's fine, but there are definitely a whole lot of people, yourself included, who just can't stop exploring and want to know about the world. And you have a real affinity with other people who feel that way. So I'm afraid that's not a terribly good answer to your question, but
it's a great answer, Lyn. The affinity you mentioned of kind of like, being around other people that have that sort of need to satiate the wanderlust. I mean, you mentioned the wanderlust gene. That's not an expression. There was an actual scientific study that was trying to prove that people have a wanderlust gene, and that could be the reason why we are built the way we are. I could try to dig up that article and link to it here in the show notes, but I find that kind of fascinating to think, is this like biologically built into us?
That's kind of reassuring to know who it was, but it goes back as well, when Bruce Chatwin wrote Songlines all those years ago, which was a book I read way back, I think it was in the 1980s or something. And he talked, he didn't call it the Wanderlust gene, but he talked about the fact that that many of us are nomads at heart. That's the way we were born, and you can see that all the way back. Certain societies were nomadic, and that can still live on today. And I think you picked up on the word affinity as well. I think there is that affinity, and I was just talking to somebody the other day about an event we did a few years ago. It was over 2 nights, and it was a dinner. It was arranged with a tourist board, and we invited our readers to it. And the person from the tourist board, who was quite formidable, everybody was terrified of her. The first night, she said to me, you and I are going to sit in the corner. And I was like, oh, okay. I wanted to be out with the readers, the middle of the place. Anyway, the evening started, and within a few minutes, she said to me, Lyn, I don't understand. Do all these people know each other? I said, no. She said, but they're all talking to each other. Well, that's Wanderlust readers for you. And I said, they've naturally got lots to share. So the evening was a complete joy. And when I arrived on the second night, and the director of the tourist board we were working with arrived, when she came in, she put her coat and bag on a seat in the middle of the restaurant. And she said, Lyn, I'm going to sit with the readers tonight. Thought, yes.
Yeah.
But it is that, again, it's just, getting like-minded people together. It's incredible. And that is very much our audience. And that's who Wanderlust was aimed at, and we've stuck to that over the years, whatever the trends, whatever is going on in the world, and that is very much still the buzz we get with our readers today.
That is an indication that you have built something from the heart, right? Like just hearing you speak about it, and also like being, I would say probably some of my favorite companies and my favorite entrepreneurs like yourself are the people that are like the scratch your own itch type of entrepreneurs that I talk to. They're like, oh, we want this thing. All right, we're going to make the thing that we want. And then of course there are other people that feel the same way, and just kind of like being, I mean, I'm just pulling out some, I guess, business advice if anybody's listening, but just like that idea of like keeping the focus always on giving those people what they want. I think print publications are a great example of like an industry that has gone through a radical change because of the internet, right? Like you've had to navigate that, and you've had to basically, figure out those changes to keep the business going. But you putting the readers at the center of that at all times was the thing that allowed you to keep it going, it sounds like.
That's right. And so, for instance, it was one of the things that kept us going, obviously, through the COVID years, the pandemic, because the readers still wanted a magazine. It went very, very skinny, but we were still bringing it out. We had all these very loyal subscribers. And we had to think, what else can we do? We're not traveling. What else can we do with the readers? So we introduced a Friday afternoon quiz on our website. And that became huge. And we did think after the, lockdowns were finished that would die down. But actually, we still get this big spike on a Friday afternoon of people going on to the latest quiz. And, again, when I'm out and about at an event or something, readers will come up and say, I love your quizzes. And so it's just adapting all the time and trying to be, what can we do? What do the readers want? And just very much keeping in touch with them. So it is a joy always to meet readers and be able to have those chats with them.
Congratulations, first of all, on like coming up on your 4th decade. That's insane. And this is why I wanted to have you on for this month's theme in this particular episode about trends, because you've been following, like your job is to stay ahead of travel trends year in and year out for decades. So before we dive into the list, though, I do want to hear your thoughts on how travel as an industry has changed. And I think this is a good way to sort of dive into the list you're sharing today.
When we started back in the 1990s, it felt like the travel was very much divided, if you like, between package holidays, what now often gets called fly and flop, where people were going somewhere warmer. Certainly, I'm talking now about readers in the UK, obviously, but people in the UK, for their holiday, they just wanted to go somewhere hot, or more reliable weather anyway. They wanted a pool. They wanted a few activities, but essentially that was it. It was fairly simple. And that was, if you talked about holidays or about travel, that was that. And then on the other hand, you got perhaps what was mostly independent travel. Sometimes it was travel with tour operators. There were a number of tour operators coming along doing adventurous trips. But you got this, other world of more adventurous type travel. So obviously backpacking, independent travel, and going with what we very much called adventure tour operators. But that was fairly small. People didn't even know that you could go off and spend a few days in a jungle in Borneo, and that you could actually quite easily arrange that. And, I always remember, if I went to the hairdressers and the hairdresser said, oh, you're going anywhere for holiday this year? And I've always hated that question. And if I said, well, actually, I'm just back from Sumatra, they'd have a real shock. Whereas now, of course, you're more likely to, in a hairdresser, to have somebody tell you that, they themselves are just back from Vietnam. So I think the world has really opened up since the early 1990s. There's been this explosion. Part of it was through more affordable flights coming in, the whole cheap flights thing. That made it easier for people to explore the world, even if that started in, closer to home, but then going further afield. And the internet has obviously made a huge difference. Having smartphones has made a massive difference. And so, in a way, travel has become a lot more democratic. It's very easy now for people to go to places that when I was growing up, you would only see on a documentary on television. And now, though, that's within reach of everybody. And so, it's a lot more democratic. And hence it feels that also then, therefore, people who many years ago, there are still people who just want to go on holiday, just want to lie by a pool. That's fine. Absolutely fine if that's what you want. There are obviously been people coming through who, no, they want more than that. Maybe they travelled with their parents or went to adventurous destinations. And so, of course, they've had their eyes open to the world and they do want to explore the world more and go to off the beaten track destinations, or to actually have experiences. And that's the other big thing that's, I think, changed, because when we started Wanderlust back in the early 1990s, the focus back then with any kind of travel or holiday, not just with Wanderlust, was about the place. People would ask where you were going and people would talk about where they had been. And now it is much more on the experiences, the kind of immersive experiences that people do there. And so people aren't just thinking, oh, I want to go to Vietnam. They are thinking about what are the things they will actually do while they are there, and whether that is they're following hobbies and interests that they already have, or whether it is immersing themselves in local culture and things that they can only do in Vietnam. And so that is where I've seen a big sea change, and it at times it feels as if a lot of the world, a lot of travel has caught up with Wanderlust and with what we've been pioneering since 1993.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip: hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop. Now, back to the show. Curious where you're at with prepping your trends article for the coming year. I know it has yet to be written, and that was one of my intentions with this whole theme this month is, hey, let's get listeners ahead of the trends before these sort of articles and things even pop. And I'm curious to hear what you've brought with you today in terms of what we can talk about, what you see as some trends coming up in 2025, and how they can be valuable for people listening. Where do you want to kick it off?
Let's talk about maybe meeting locals and indigenous tourism, which is something we're seeing a huge growth in. When people travel, it's not just about the place anymore. And it used to be that when we would do big articles maybe 20 years ago, which would be the 50 places you have to see. And, the Taj Mahal would always be number one or something. But like I say, it's the world has moved on from that. And it's much more now about the experiences there. Now, one thing that has perhaps always struck us is that when you talk about a trip, say you have been to India, you've been to the Taj Mahal, when you come back and you talk about your trip, you probably won't talk about the Taj Mahal. You might have a lovely photo of it. But what you will talk about is about perhaps the people that you met while you were away. And I think we have always been very aware of the locals and how they are very much part of the story of your travels. And so I remember even back in 1993, our first ever articles included locals. We would talk about them. We would have their names and in there, and we would sometimes highlight them, have tips from them, show photographs of them, and make them very much part of the story, because they are part of the story when you travel. And this might not sound that unique, but actually it was. I mean, I remember being in a travel writing talk back in the 1990s by a very well-respected editor, and he actually said in this talk, yeah, well, and of course, you know, it's good to bring in a bit of local colour and local people if you can. But of course, when we travel, we rarely actually probably get to meet people. So he said, so what you can always do is ask your taxi driver on the way to the airport or from the airport. I was horrified by this because for me, the style of travel I did was to go out, which, because obviously I'd done a lot of independent travel, was to actually engage with locals. And so we were very aware that this was very much part of the experience, and it's what made travel special. Anyway, so all those years later, we regularly do include locals in the print magazine, on our online articles. We have tips from locals, and ask a local. We do incorporate them. But our editor-in-chief, George, he actually said to me a few weeks ago, do you know what? We should actually make more of this and just make it a bit more obvious that this is what we do. So next year, we're going to call it Year of the Locals. And I think we'll just make sure, I mean, we already, like I say, include it, but we're just going to make more of a thing of it. And it's something we're currently talking about amongst the team of how we're going to bring that in and bring it to the forefront. Because I think it's one of those things that perhaps people aren't consciously thinking about when they travel. It hasn't perhaps struck them before, but that when they travel, it is very often your encounters with locals that create some of the best memories when you travel. I find it, like I say, I love talking to our readers and things, and it has really struck me time and time again when we're talking to the readers that they bring up, oh yes, you're thinking of going to blah. Oh, well, you must make sure you go to the local whichever restaurant. You must make sure you go to a certain square in the evening. You must make sure you go to this certain market because you'll meet the locals. And so this is something that, like I say, we just want to bring a bit more to the forefront and always sort of point out to our readers that this is something that does add so much to the trip. Now, kind of aligned to that, if you like, is recognising Indigenous communities. So, again, going back in time to my own travels, perhaps in the 1980s and early 1990s, I remember, for instance, travelling around Australia and finding, to my horror, that there was some quite overt racism towards, obviously, the Indigenous people of Australia, and which made me feel very uncomfortable. And I also remember even, quite a few years later, when we had Wanderlust, having a meeting with some Australian tourism people, when I asked about if there were any Aboriginal experiences, as they would have then been called, available, and being told no, there was little point setting them up. There wouldn't be the interest, and etc., etc. And it just didn't seem to figure at all. Now, fortunately, the world has moved on, and it is something that we have seen very much, that now in Australia, in the US, in Canada, in many corners of the world, there are now a whole range of Indigenous travel experiences. And of course, and I'm talking about not just some dreadful folklore show or going to see some people dressed up in a costume and, putting on a bit of an act for the tourists. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about proper, meaningful, authentic experiences with Indigenous people. So this is a trend that we have been aware of for the last few years. We have seen more and more interest in it from travellers who want to go and have a meaningful connection with Indigenous people and learn about the culture. And conversely, we've also seen more of these experiences become available. We've seen more Indigenous-owned lodges, for instance, rainforest lodges, more Indigenous-owned companies offering experiences. So for instance, if you go, one of the best places in the world to go whale watching is Kaikoura in New Zealand. You can go and see, or year round, you can see sperm whales up close, just offshore. It's a beautiful spot. But the leading whale watching company there is Maori owned and Maori run. And, that's great. And that one has actually been going for quite a while now. And it's an excellent company, and it really adds to the experience. And it's very appropriate because some people say that Kaikoura on the South Island is perhaps where the first Maori settlements were. So it really adds to the experience. And, if you go to, I was in Guyana a few years ago, and incredible place. They've protected something like 86% of their rainforest. Once you get outside of the capital, there's very few roads. There's probably one main road through the country. So you get about by riverboat if you want to go into the rainforest. And when I was there, one of the places I went to was to an Indigenous community called Rewa. They own an eco lodge, and you go and stay in this eco lodge, and they set it up, I can't quite remember how many years ago now, but it was because they realised that they needed to provide a sustainable future for their community, and they wanted to keep their young people living in the community. They didn't want them having to go off and find jobs in other countries or whatever. They had to build a sustainable future, so they couldn't just live anymore by a bit of fishing and hunting and so on. So they saw ecotourism would perhaps be the way, and they went and looked at examples at a couple of other places where eco lodges have been built, and they thought, yeah, we could do that. And so they've got an eco lodge, and so there's incredible bird watching. You can go out on boat trips, you can go out on canoes. You go in search of giant river otters, giant spiders, the biggest tarantula in the world. And if that's your thing. They also are very much guardians and conservers of the world's largest freshwater fish. I think it's called the arapaima. Excuse me if I've got this slightly wrong, but they're these giant fish. and they were very threatened, very endangered. But of course now they're not killed for food or anything anymore, and they protect those, and you can go and see them. People go from around the world to see these fish. And so you're going out and having an extraordinary rainforest experience, the sort of thing that, you know, you would see on a nature documentary. You are going there and experiencing it. But what really adds to it is that you are going with an Indigenous guide who lives there and whose grandparents and generations back are from there, and can also fill you in on stories of myths and legends, and really give you some history and context, and really bring it to life. Another example, I'm just back from KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. I never thought I'd be interested in battlefields, but one of the things that this corner of northeast South Africa has is it was the scene of some very famous battles in the Anglo-Zulu War and in the Anglo-Boer War. Like I say, I didn't think I'd have a particular interest in battlefields. I know some people would go to KwaZulu-Natal just to do that. But one of my greatest memories from that trip is visiting the site of a particular battlefield with a local Zulu guide. And this is where a very famous war was fought, or battle was fought, where the British basically got wiped out by the Zulus. And to have a Zulu guide from the area whose grandfather and great-grandfather were part of that Zulu army who fought in that battle, and talk about it and bring it to life, just added so much clearly to the experience. So, sorry, I've been rattling on, but those are some of the experiences that can really lead to an understanding of a culture and can add so much to one's own travel experience as well. And of course, the local communities benefit in all sorts of ways, culturally, economically. The traveller benefits. And so that was something that, as I say, we've seen a growth in the various reports, but in certain countries, I think I saw a report the other day that I think in Australia, Indigenous tourism is up 61% year on year. And so there is a growing interest in it. And we've just gone to press with a magazine in which we highlight what we consider 50 of the best experiences of that type around the world. And we worked very much with relevant associations to find the right ones. So the American India Alaska Native Tourism Association, for instance, or the Discover Aboriginal Experiences in Australia organisation, for instance, to make sure we were picking out some of these best-in-kind experiences.
The Zulu guide, that takes the immersion to a whole other level in that example. And I think that for travelers, I guess, before we move on from this, it's just really about kind of perhaps, I'm going to say like doing tons of research, but just kind of making sure, like you mentioned, like the alternative version of this that might not be so appealing is the, sort of like the generic, I'm going to be in costumes on display for tourist experience versus, more authentic interaction with indigenous population. Is that just about kind of reverse engineering, maybe going to some of the indigenous organizations and seeing what tours they support? Or obviously you're going to have like this article. So how do you, like, what's the best sort of your best advice for kind of finding those?
Yeah, I mean, this article will be, we always put things in print first. So it won't be going online for a few weeks, but it will be going online. But yeah, in some of these countries, there are associations and they're a good place to start. And also some of the more reputable tour companies are worth going to. The real question to ask with a business or with a lodge or any kind of experience is probably who owns it. If it is actually Indigenous owned or part Indigenous owned, because sometimes, of course, it might be an arrangement between an indigenous community, but they'll use a tourism supplier as well that they work with and trust. There are different ways of doing it, but if it is at least part indigenous owned, and if it is indigenous managed, then that is obviously a very good place to start. So yeah, it's just a question of looking into that and understanding that.
When you're reading those stories, when you're booking things, like if that's the case, then those stories generally seem to be front and center on a website or something to kind of let you know who's owning and what they do. And so it just takes, for the independent traveler, I would say it doesn't take that much extra if you're like, hey, and by the way, I love the theme, the year of the local coming up. I mean, anybody listening can feel free to steal that theme for their own travels and just be like, hey, this is the year of the local. Let's focus on the local. We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. Now, back to the show. You did advance some of these over, and I know next up you have this idea of cruises that aren't cruises in the traditional sense, let's say, because we might hear the C word might be a dirty word in some travelers' ears. We're talking about cruises.
For me, I shudder when I hear the C word.
So let's talk about expedition cruises.
So what we're talking about, we're not talking about the sort of cruise where you've got casinos and entertainment and dancing girls and and thousands
magicians.
And thousands of cabins. Yeah, exactly.
Don't forget the magicians.
Oh, yeah, we're not talking that. What we are talking about is going on a small ship, or it might be a yacht, some sort of expedition type vessel, and exploring remote areas on it. And your entertainment is going to be perhaps talks by experts, and there'll be an expedition crew who are very fun, cool people and very knowledgeable on the trip. And so, there has been incredible growth in the last few years in this type of travel. So expedition cruising, and the emphasis really is on the expedition and not the C word. I've long thought that it's a shame there's not an alternative word. And then I was at a conference this year on expedition cruising, and one of the speakers actually said that, because it's not something to market to what they would call a cruise audience. It's more marketed towards people who are at heart independent travelers, off the beaten track travelers. And
it's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different mindset, different type of people. So there's obvious destinations like the Arctic and the Antarctic. And those have been for quite a while now, quite well established. But in the last few years, quite a few new ships have come along to meet this demand. And we are talking, like I say, small ships. They might be under 100 passengers, or hundreds a popular number, or in some cases up to 200. And so you would typically go to the Arctic and Antarctic, and you might have a couple of excursions per day, going off on a Zodiac or whatever, maybe having a shore landing. And one of the big changes that they have seen with those ones is that, you get people who come along and their big dream is to follow in the footsteps of Shackleton or, some of the other famous explorers, Antarctic explorers. You learn a lot about the history of exploration as well. But they're increasingly attracting a younger, more active crowd as well, and they're having to react to that. So quite a lot of these trips now also include activities such as sleeping out on the ice, camping out on ice overnight, kayaking amongst icebergs, and just generally getting out and about more and actually doing something physical. Going for a long hike, whatever, going snowshoeing. So lots going on in that area, and really, really good to see. And then, but the other sort of growth, and I was even surprised at this myself in recent months, was the growth in what gets called warm water expedition cruises. So it makes a lot of sense, really, that very often it might even be these same ships, that they'll spend a season in Antarctica, but what do they do the rest of the year? In some cases, it's the same ships are going to other places in the world. And of course, people, once they have perhaps been to the Arctic or the Antarctic, they want to go and explore somewhere else. So, you can go, for instance, one that I know really stood out to me was going along the coast of West Africa. And, and going to so many of these West African countries that you may not have even thought before of even visiting. But yeah, so you go along the coast and we'll have stop-offs again, going for exploring, communities, might be meeting indigenous people, rainforest hikes, and so forth. And you get to see a lot of countries that you may have otherwise never gone to. You can go island hopping around Indonesia, is one that's really up and coming. I saw one that was island hopping around the islands of Japan. Looked really good. Going to places like West Papua or Papua New Guinea, around there. French Polynesia. There are just so many places. And of course, it's a wonderful way of traveling, and getting to places that you perhaps otherwise realistically wouldn't be able to get to.
That's the thing. Yeah. It's really putting the focus on, it's not the experience on the boat. It's the utilizing boat as a means of transportation. That's also a comfortable means to get to access places that are harder to get to, perhaps, or just like aren't typically touristed. And that's the sort of the big change from, talking about a traditional cruise to, hey, this is like a boat that you can take to explore some different places. That just flips everything.
Yeah.
Around.
Very much so. And I think we sometimes forget that there are so many parts of the world that are still unexplored and don't have mass tourism. As you absolutely say, this is a way that you can access them. And you're using it in that way. But also the time on ship is usually enjoyable as well, because like I say, you do have experts usually on these trips. So you will be finding out about the places you're going to be visiting. You'll be finding out about the wildlife and nature. You'll be finding out about the history. You'll be ones that where you're going to be meeting different communities as well. You'll find out about those people and their culture as well. And so a very, very, very different type of trip to, as I say, what a traditional cruise would be. And,
if that sounds interesting, expedition cruises, something to add to the listener here, something to add to your list of research or just ideation. What's next, Lyn? What else we got?
Well, rail having a bit of a golden age, and obviously within Europe there has been an explosion of new overnight sleepers, new routes in recent years, very recent years. But we're also seeing it around the world as well. So in some cases, it's lines that hadn't been used for quite some time are coming back into use. In others, it is the extra services are coming on, whether putting together existing ones. So more overnight sleepers, more luxury trains are being put on to try and appeal particularly to for tourism. It's just being recognised as a way of travelling more sustainably. It's, tends to obviously be much better for the planet on the whole than flying is. So there's a little bit of that, why people are doing it and why the demand is there. It's also partly the romance of rail and people wanting, I think, to have a journey as opposed to getting on the plane, traveling for a couple of hours, getting off the plane and being somewhere completely new and different. But perhaps feeling that you've missed out on all the in-between bit, as you look down out of the plane window. So it's partly that love of a journey again, and all that brings. It's a great way, actually, traveling by train. If you're on proper local trains, not on a luxury one that's just for tourists. But if you're on a regular train, then obviously it's a great way to meet locals, go back to meeting the locals. And it's much more conducive to that. If you're on a long rail journey, you're going to get talking to the people around you very often. And so we've seen this explosion in it. But also we suddenly realised that 2025 is the 200th anniversary of the origins of rail travel.
Oh, wow.
So so we're certainly going to be celebrating it all year. We're going to be featuring a great rail journey in every issue of our magazine this year, next year in 2025, starting probably with the Reunification Express, which goes through Vietnam, because it's also 50 years since the fall of Saigon and so on. So not to hark back too much on that, but I think there is obviously a lot of interest in that period of history. But also it's just a brilliant way to travel through Vietnam and get off at various points and explore from the train. So that's one that we'll be featuring. So for people who think, the luxury of the Orient Express, I'd love to do something like that. And for people who are passionate about Italy, if you've got the money to do it, there's this new La Dolce Vita Orient Express, which has launched in Italy. And, it's expensive. I'm not pretending it's not, but it'll be one of those things that people, I'm sure, will want to do for special birthdays or special anniversaries or, to mark something. So I think there's that kind of interest in the golden age or the old golden age of travel. It all comes back to just being a brilliant way to travel and us appreciating that again. And if we get any feedback at all from readers, any negative feedback, it's more that their interest is there. And this kind of revolution in train travel isn't perhaps happening quite fast enough for them, and finding good sources of information of how to do it. But yeah, there's a huge explosion of interest in it.
Knowing that this is a trend and that more routes are coming out, it could be interesting and fun to perhaps be one of the early travelers on one of these new routes, just to check it out and try something new that not a lot of people have tried.
Yeah.
So something that people
definitely. Very much so.
Be on the lookout for. Yeah. You mentioned wellness is another trend we talked about, but not in the traditional spa sense. And I wanted to talk about that as another trend because, yeah, I mean, well, you can speak to this. There's like the industry side of things in a way where like they're trying to sell you a certain thing, and then there's like I don't want to say actual. No. I don't want to say actual health and well-being because of certainly some of these nice, who wouldn't like to stay at a nice spa and kind of like be pampered a little bit? That even like the most crusty backpacker might enjoy, lounging around in some warm pools and getting a mud treatment or something. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that either, is I think what you're saying. And can you talk about that?
It doesn't have to be a traditional spa. I remember being on a kind of press trip once, one of these trips where they take a few journalists and show them places. And they said, we're going to a spa. And we went to this terrifying place where, full of very hard-faced women in white coats who marched us along and it would show these treatments. And it was like, no, the last thing I want to do is strip off here and have a treatment. No. Oh,
yeah,
we're
gonna rip out your fingernails and then we're gonna put new ones on, and it's gonna be this incredible rejuvenating thing. It's like, what? No.
Yeah, what? No. So I must admit, I ran off. I went for a pizza and a glass of wine instead in the nearby town. Jumped into a taxi, fled. Fortunately, things have moved on, and you still get there's a sort of more traditional type of spa, and those vary. And if it's your thing, absolutely great. Fine. But I think, we're in an age where it's a whole combination of things are happening. We lead increasingly fast lives, where, we cram so much in, and so many of us work crazy hours, and we're always on, doing something, even when we're not working, we're on our social media, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing things with friends. And so there's been a real movement, I think, towards people just wanting some rest, rejuvenation, lots of words begin with R, relaxation, and to really reset. But they want to do it in perhaps a more natural way, and not necessarily surrounded by hard-faced women in white coats. So it's more, wanting to perhaps be somewhere more natural, where they can hear bird song and they're going to hear crashing waves. Perhaps trying local treatments, beautiful oils or whatever, that are, made from local ingredients. They come from exactly where you are. And eating healthy foods from that destination. There's a real interest, in people going to, for instance, blue zone countries and trying to find out the secrets of how people live so long there and how they've benefited. And so just trying local treatments, and it might not even be treatments as such, but also just, it might be being in nature. It might be what in the UK gets called wild swimming, which is swimming in nature. I was once talking to a room full of Swedish people and who work in tourism. I mentioned wild swimming, and somebody actually put their hand up and asked me what wild swimming was. And when I explained it was swimming in nature, they said, "But that's what we do all the time in Sweden. That's just swimming."
Yeah. That's called swimming.
Yeah, that was the reaction I got. You would know, being in Oslo. But to the British, what swimming is going to a building and to an inside pool. And but no, swimming in nature, walking in nature all counts towards this very much well-being trend. And as I say, trying the local treatments, the local oils, the local cuisine, on the healthy side, obviously, and really getting into that. And that whole point being to really refresh, rejuvenate, turn off, be able to sleep. There are so many articles everywhere now telling people how to sleep, because it's like people have forgotten how to sleep. It's become a real thing that people worry about. And of course, the more anxiety they have about sleeping, the worse it gets.
Sure.
So again,
we need
to
our
go
sleep,
somewhere.
Lyn.
Yeah, we need our sleep. And then people worry that they're not getting their sleep, and that makes it worse. But again, going somewhere to really get that sense of well-being, that sense of perhaps being in nature as well, of having natural treatments and being able to sleep when you are there. And as I say, that leads to great rejuvenation.
Well, the solo travel trend, as you mentioned when we were talking about this chat, is something that's huge for your readers and something I think that's huge for our listeners, whether they've been on them or want to go on them. Yeah, you put this on your list, so I'm just wondering what you see in terms of solo travel and what that might mean as a listener. Like, knowing that's a trend, what can they do with it? Or does that mean there's more like offers if you're a solo traveler to connect solo travelers together if they want the group thing? Is it just more support for it, more accepted? I want to hear your thoughts on solo travel. And you, by the way, you guys wrote a whole book on this at one point. I think in
that was a little
2021.
lockdown project I did. I wrote a book in a weekend on solo travel tips.
Wanderlust, how to travel solo, holiday tips for independent adventurers. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's just a book of tips. I just, literally, like I say, nice little lockdown project that was. But we've always championed solo travel, and I guess that was in part because I myself have done so much solo travel over the years, ranging from independent travel back in the day, business travel, and obviously when I go to do stories for the magazine, I'm often on my own, and in doing so, what's always struck me as well is how many other solo travelers I've met. And again, and that goes the whole gamut. It includes business travelers, and I might be staying in a business travel hotel of some sort. But I see other, very often women on their own. And we sometimes end up connecting and talking. So it's something that right from the beginning we've always covered, and it's a real regular, and we feel we have a lot of knowledge on. And one of my frustrations over the years was that it wasn't perhaps recognised so much, and that there would be talk about single travellers. And I think what a lot of the industry didn't realise or appreciate was that a solo traveller isn't necessarily single. They could very much be in a relationship. They could be married. They might have a family.
And I love that. I love that when people support each other on like solo travel. And there's like, this is important. Something my wife and I have talked about. This is like an important value. Like sometimes you just have to take the solo trip,
Yeah. Well, this is it. We're all have different interests, and I think that it's a sign of a healthy relationship as well. If, you're happy for your partner to go off and follow their quest, and it can actually really help a relationship. So there are, I'd love to, perhaps one day you and I should do a whole thing about solo travel, because there's so much that can be said about it. And, so I think it's good for one's own well-being. It's good for relationships, ironically. It's a chance for perhaps people sometimes to try on a different personality, because in our everyday lives so much, we are a reflection perhaps of how other people see us. So we are a husband or a wife, we're a parent maybe, or we're the daughter or the son, we're the work colleague, we're the boss, we're the employee. We are those people, and without realizing, we can find ourselves just reinforcing that role all the time, how people expect us to be. And what I always find incredible is how transformative solo travel can be for people. And like I say, it gives them a chance to slip on a different skin. If they're perhaps on a safari sitting around a campfire with a bunch of other guests, they don't have to be Ruth from accounts anymore. They're not Ruth the mum, or Ruth the great athlete, or Ruth who takes the Pilates class, or any of those people. They can be whoever they want. And I've witnessed these transformations in people after, it can be a few days of travel. So solo travel is this incredible thing. And it used to frustrate me so much when it used to get talked about as single travel, so automatically bracketing people that they were single, and perhaps that they wanted to meet other single people, I think used to be the thought. And there'll be lots of jokes around that. Well, no, that's not usually the case. So anyway, there has been a boom in it, and also the industry have woken up to this and starting to take proper notice of it. So what we have seen very much in recent times is tour companies catering for this more by, for instance, offering perhaps trips that are free of the single supplement. E.g. At quiet times of year outside of season, because actually if it's not family holiday time or something, it's a quiet time of year, that make sense for them to do. Some even offer solo only departures at certain times of year. So for people who might be worried that, if they might end up traveling with couples and they'd rather be with a bunch of solos, then you get these solo only departures. There's also been an increase in, for instance, women only departures. And sometimes those are, again, for people who might be a bit nervous about traveling in a mixed group and, or couples and so on, but it means they'll know they're going to travel with a bunch of like-minded women. And that might have a woman guide as well, which is another thing we're noticing, many more women tour guides coming along. So there's a whole range of that. And also see it with accommodation. I've seen various hotels and lodges make more of a thing about the fact that they might have either certain dates where they do special offers for solos, or they might have, in some cases, they might have, a cocktail hour that they invite solos to. They might have the option of sitting with other solo people for meals. And so there has just been a huge awakening in the industry. There also used to be a kind of misconception that it was young single people who were solo travelers. And in fact, what's become more and more clear is that probably the biggest bulge tends to be over 50s women. And those are the ones who are really wanting to get out, explore the world, and do it, either completely on their own or by joining a group of like-minded people. But there's also, just in the last few weeks, been stories that there are a lot more searches being done by solo men looking for opportunities to do a great trip. And again, the sort of things that people are often looking for are some of the things we've already talked about, and things like expedition cruises get a very high proportion of solo travellers going on them. Some of these rail journeys get a high proportion of solo people going on them. They know it's a good way, it's a convenient way to travel, it's an interesting way of travel, and they know they're going to meet other people, whether local or other solos. So,
I love it. Love that solo travel's a trend, because it's been hugely transformative in my life. And also, I love that, the show is about helping people travel. And I think when people are empowered to just say, hey, I'm not waiting for somebody to travel with, the perfect time, I can just take off on my own. That's the ultimate freedom, because then you feel like, if you haven't done it before, then once you do it and you have the experience and you gain the confidence as a solo traveler, it opens up the whole world to you. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because you don't feel limited by having to be a part of something or with somebody to go do the things you want to do. And so it's awesome. So I'm glad that's on this list. And I know we're coming into our last one. I appreciate your time. I want to respect it. I'll tease this one out by saying things are looking up in 2025. Ha. Get it? Get it. Take it away, Lyn. Take us home. What does that mean?
This is a bit of a cheat, because last year when I did a trends piece for Wanderlust, I talked, I think I put one in that was look to the skies, but we've got to do it again, because there is such a growth in interest in stargazing, what gets called astrotourism. There is massive interest in seeing the Northern Lights, the aurora. And of course, at the moment, certainly Europe is in a period of solar maximus, where there are many more opportunities to see the Northern Lights. And so this winter, you know, and we know it's just going to boom like mad. People just want to travel to see the lights. They want to know how to take photographs of them. There are new air routes to various places in, for instance, Scandinavia from the UK. So people will be going again, hoping to see the Northern Lights. Dark sky reserves is something we see a huge interest in. New dark sky reserves are coming along all the area. You know, this is obviously where a place can apply for a designation because they have so little natural light. I mentioned Kaikoura in New Zealand earlier in the show and talking about whale watching with an Indigenous company. But Kaikoura has just outside the actual city, they've designated a dark sky reserve, and that's, you know, another factor. You know, we know that story that we put it on our website has driven a lot of traffic, and people want to know about that. It comes back to people, perhaps so many more people living in cities and also working long hours, doing all of this, and now they've realised that actually get away from lights, you know, the unnatural lights, the city lights, get out into nature and look to the sky. And whether it's looking at the Milky Way, whether it's, finding out more about the stars, whether it's even sleeping out under the stars, whether it's looking for northern lights, all these things have just really caught the imagination. Solar eclipses, you know, how do we see a solar eclipse is a search we see very often. And, you know, and people basing their travels around that as well. People talk about the different phases of the moon more now, I've noticed, and the different names that different moons at different times of the year have, you know. I can guarantee 20, 30 years ago, people wouldn't have said to me, you know, it's a super moon next week. Yeah, I think it's the hunter's moon. We didn't have those conversations. And now you hear people, you know, saying this. So, it's wonderful to see this interest, and it's the awe and the wonder of seeing the night sky and all
it's
things
the
celestial.
ultimate humbling, you know, mechanism, I guess. I looking up at the sky. Can you imagine what our ancient ancestors would think about, like, oh, we're going to have to travel to a place where there's as a designated dark sky park so we can look at the stars? They'd be like, what are you? What is this world I've dropped in on?
I know.
This is bizarre, but that's,
of course,
you know,
they understood. Many of these old civilizations understood the sky far more than we do, and the phases of nature and so on. And they would plant according to when there was going to be a new moon. They would know, so in some societies, they would kind of know themselves, and we don't know how. They would know when there was going to be an eclipse. I talked about a Zulu battlefield earlier. The Zulus were not intending to fight that day because it was a partial eclipse, and they knew it was going to be a partial eclipse. And how did they know in advance that? You know, but they had a much deeper understanding of the cycles of nature. They knew the signs for, even if they didn't understand what it was or how it happened, they understood the signs, and they also understood, therefore, as I say, things like, as something as basic as when best to plant their crops. And I think it's wonderful that it's not exactly coming full circle, but it's wonderful to see that we are getting an appreciation again of natural phenomena.
Yeah. I just quickly, while you were sharing this, I did check out, there's a website called darksky.org that where you can find these international dark sky places. I found one in Norway. It's Norway's first certified international dark sky place. It's only a 24-hour drive from where I live. So maybe I'll hop in the car one day and just drive 24 hours straight north. No, but these resources, because this has come up on the podcast recently, and I hadn't heard about these dark sky parks and places like that. So it's an interesting approach, bringing it back to the sort of how does this impact the individual traveler listening. It's just like another methodology for planning, right? Like you could take a tour that takes you to like a Northern Lights area, or perhaps like you independently find like one of these dark sky parts that takes you to a place that maybe not as many people are going, and just takes you on a different type of journey. Again, these trends, I think, to kind of summarize this conversation, are a way in to different, whether it's modes of travel, travel experiences. You can have different itineraries. These trends, and thinking about them and looking at them as you plan in the coming year, are a way into a whole different travel experience, I guess. So, you could think about them as that way. And, I appreciate you coming on and sharing them and giving us a little sneak peek into like what you guys actually have coming up and what you're going to be publishing in print and online in the coming year. It's really cool to get to chat with you and kind of get the inside scoop, which we love to get here. So anytime you want to come back and give us the inside scoop on something, Lyn, let us know. I wanted to ask you about, before I let you go, of course, we'll link up to everything in the show notes, and people should definitely check out wanderlustmagazine.com. You can sign up for the newsletter over there. And you guys have a podcast and everything as well. I'm sure you can find all the links there. It's very few people that, are loving and so curious about travel and so want to like fill their lives with it so much that they create an entire business around it just so they can be talking about travel and living and breathing travel all the time for their whole lives, which is what you've done. Was there a trip you can pinpoint, or a moment, whether it was in your childhood or perhaps when you were older, that kind of like you think maybe was the thing that was the spark that lit the fire for you about travel?
Yeah, there probably was one that was incredibly influential. So when I was in my 20s, I hadn't done the backpacking thing after school or college or anything. I'd gone straight into work, and I was doing a lot of corporate travel in my 20s, and lots of going to cities. And I love travel, but I'd very much explore cities more. But I was getting an itch, an itch to travel, but I wanted to fit it in around the job, and I think 3 weeks was the maximum I could take. So I did a trip. Well, in fact, it was 2 back-to-back trips in Thailand, and I did it through what was an adventure tour operator called Explore, who still exists now, and it really opened my eyes. It was a small group trip, maybe 16 or 18 people, all walks of life. And we were exploring northern Thailand. And when I look back, I think now how influential that was, because perhaps I became aware of solo travel and what a thing it was, because most of the other people on that trip were solos. And as I say, from all walks of life. And to see the transformation for many of them just on that trip, just in those 3 weeks, was incredible. It made me aware of the importance of good guides, to have an amazing guide. I can still remember the name of our guide on that trip. His name was Chan. He was just incredible. He was like a psychologist. He understood us all. He understood what we wanted from the trip and made sure that we were all getting the maximum out of the trip. I learnt about indigenous cultures on that trip. I learnt about nature on that trip. And I came back from that trip with an even bigger itch of wanting to go exploring again. And so I think that was probably the most influential trip that set me on this course of my life.
You want to leave us with any words of wisdom, or like a quote you're living by right now, or anything at all? Here, the floor is yours.
No, just don't. All I say is just do it when you can. I'm sitting in my home office, and I've got a sticky note on the wall in front of me, and it says 5,000 days. And that's because I was listening to something, maybe on a radio or another podcast, when where somebody was saying that they'd worked out how many days they'd got left on the earth. I mean, you don't know how many you've got, but it made them think about it, how many they might have. And they weren't talking about travel. They were talking more generally about, not wasting your life. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I did a very, very, rough calc, and I said maybe 5,000 days. So I've got that stuck on the board in front of me. That I'd use that sometimes to remind me, because, I think it's all too easy to just get carried along. Life goes so quickly, years go so quickly. And so in the context of travel, I think I've got to make sure, I'm getting out. I don't travel as much as people think, because I've still got a day job. I still work full time for Wanderlust. But it is thinking about getting out, doing meaningful trips, getting great travel experiences, and really enjoying and getting as much out of those as I can, and appreciating that we are living in this wonderful age where we can travel. We have the means to travel. There are still many places left to explore. And so just making sure that life doesn't go so fast that we forget to go out and do that exploration.
Love it. Nothing will make you slow down and think than having the number of days you have left on Earth posted right in front of you. That's a great exercise, a great way to end this. Thank you so very much, Lyn, for your time. Yeah, look forward to doing it again sometime. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Like I say, I love your show. It's a joy. Yeah, you cover such a range of things. So well done.
Thank you very much. Take care. We'll chat soon.
Cheers. Bye.
There you have it. A quick thanks once again to Lyn Hughes for stopping by the show. Check out wanderlustmagazine.com for some more incredible travel-related content. I love what they do over there. Now, don't forget, the show's not over. We've got this bonus segment coming your way right now. It's part 1 of our road trip planning guide, a new mini-series you're going to hear in the coming weeks. And really the intention here is to help you plan a different kind of road trip in the coming year, to give you some ideas, inspiration, and advice around that. So please enjoy the very first part of this mini-series. I had a blast putting this together for you. Stick around on the back end. I'll also leave you with a quote to wrap up this episode. Our friends at Defender love a great road trip, and I want to thank them for supporting these bonus segments you're going to be hearing in these upcoming episodes. Our road trip planning guide. It's all geared towards helping you plan an epic road trip in the coming year. You're going to hear about some incredible itineraries, top road trip hacks, and much more. And in our final segment, you're going to plan an actual road trip for the coming year, so you have something locked in, something you're excited about. And yeah, you've probably been on road trips before, but let's approach it a different way. Let's keep an open mind. And I want to give you some ideas to help you plan something perhaps a little bit different in the coming year, something that you've never done before. This week, I'm going to be sharing my top 3 road trip tips based on my decade of road tripping across the USA, a decade straight, basically, and then many, many years of road trips after that. So before we dive in, I do want to encourage you to check out the ultimate road trip vehicle, the Defender. Defender's family of vehicles include the 90, 110, or 130. This icon of adventure with a tough, rigid body design has been reimagined for a new generation of explorers. That is you. You can design your Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. Now, I was thinking about how to kick this off. How do we kick off such a big series of bonus segments that's going to culminate into you planning a trip? What is a foundational element I can share that can help you take more road trips than you've ever taken in an entire year? At least give you a chance to do that. Here's what I came up with. This is something that really helped me, especially when I was doing a lot of road tripping when I was living in Colorado. And it's a simple idea, and it works across a lot of different things in life, not just travel. Because the fact of the matter is, when you can make something easy, when you can make it accessible to do, when you can decrease the barrier to entry, let's say, for anything, you'll be more likely to do it, right? And one of the challenges for taking road trips is just all the things you need to do to kind of prepare, right? It can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. And I get it. You know, life is busy, and sometimes like the weekend might sneak up on you and you might think, okay, yeah, we were going to go do this thing, but you know, I'm just tired now. I want to put it off. This is something that helped me make a spontaneous road trip a snap. And it's something I call the magic bin. Now, this might be a weird place to start, considering this is before you even hit the road. But the idea here, again, kicking off this whole series, is that you're getting something, a foundational piece that makes you more likely to take more road trips in the coming year. The magic bin it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a bin. I had a plastic bin that was a big plastic bin that I could put into my vehicle, nice and neat, that had everything I needed to take off at a moment's notice. Yours can be a duffel bag. It can be a suitcase. It doesn't have to be a bin. You can call it your magic suitcase, whatever. It's going to be those odds and ends, those things that you kind of have to spend a lot of time putting together to go. And that's going to be different for everybody. That's why I'm kind of leaving it open. I did a lot of camping when I was in Colorado. And so my bin was really geared towards all my camping gear, some meals even, like the forks and knives, the plates, like all the things I needed to kind of get out there, hit the road, and do some backcountry camping. And instead of having to gather those things all together, they were all ready to go. And then if I just wanted to take off, bam, I'd just like throw that thing in the car, pack a few clothes, and hit the road. Now, you could take this to whatever level you want. But the point is, you create your magic insert bin, duffel bag, whatever, for you, for the type of travel you like to do. If you like to go to, float around to different Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts, you like to just, drive randomly and find hotels along the way, like whatever you prefer, set yourself up in that way where you won't have a lot to do if you want to go. It is so simple and it doesn't take long to put together, but you might find just by the act of doing that and having that magic thing ready to go, you're more likely to kind of hit the road and have more travel experiences. And those don't even have to be far from home. They can be like these giant road trips, or they can be, just for a night or two. But when you have these things ready, you're ready to rock and roll. It's super helpful. So give it a try. Get your magic duffel bag, your magic bin, whatever, ready to go, and see what happens. Just see what happens in the coming months. See if you take more trips just because you simply have things ready. Okay. Second thing I want to share is based on accommodations. A lot of times we'll figure out where we want to go and then we'll book our accommodations based on where we're going. And I like to reverse engineer that. And perhaps you've done that, but if you haven't done it in a while, it can sometimes be fun to just let the accommodations dictate where you go and what you do. And you can start by just focusing on the lifestyle you want out of your accommodations, rather than perhaps every last amenity or every single thing around it. Now, let me give you a specific example. When I went on my honeymoon many years ago, we wanted to get out in nature. We wanted to be near hot springs. We wanted to just live a Colorado lifestyle and be set up somewhere for some days. We found this amazing place in Ridgway, Colorado. It had this apartment like above these people's garage. There was a fire pit out where you could like look at the mountains and have a fire. There was a hot spring 5 minutes away, just a 5-minute drive. Plenty of access to hiking and other nature-based trips that we could do as day trips. Now, if I just sat there and said, oh, where do we want to go? Oh, we want to go to Ridgway, Colorado. We never would have said that. It's just some small town. But when we started thinking about the experience we want to have, okay, we want to be near a hot spring. We want to be near nature. Okay, let's just kind of look at some of the hot springs and see what sort of small towns are around that. And so you can just kind of reverse engineer it. And I encourage you to give it a try and then lock something in, because once you just kind of lock in an accommodation, you're kind of set. And in some ways, the lack of choice in an area might be freeing and might actually free you up because, you're not trying to see everything. You're just going to go to one place, you're going to use it as a base, and you're going to kind of be there for several days and just experience some of the things that they have to offer. Some of those things you might have planned out, some of those things you might not have planned out. And that's a cool thing. So try reverse engineering your accommodation location based on the lifestyle you want to have rather than picking it after you pick the place you want to go. Give that a whirl. Okay, lastly, and this is my third and final tip. You're going to probably hear this and think, he's just like this old school Gen X dude. Come on, what's wrong with you, dude? But I swear by it. I'm telling you, ask people instead of asking Google. I know in this age with AI and the smartphones and all the things, we have so much information at our fingertips. But it does eliminate that human interaction, right? And maybe it's not so much about extracting as much as we can from a destination, as one of my guests recently said, and I think that's a great word. Maybe it's just about showing up and just having an experience. And if we make a core part of that talking to people, whether that's wandering down to the local tourist office and just asking somebody what to do there, or, I always like to approach locals on the street because people are proud to show you their hometown, show you the things that they know and love. And, this can be hit or miss, of course. Like, you might not end up at the best restaurants in the world, for example, if you ask locals where to eat. But I find that if you ask enough people and you hear of a place like 2 or 3 times, more often than not, it's a good bet. And even if you could have gone on the internet and found that place on Google or wherever as like a top place to go, there's something satisfying about just ending up at a place through human interaction, through people's recommendations. And if you just approach it like that and say, hey, where do the people from here eat? Where do you like to go? Where do they have good specials? I'm just using food as an example because it's a great excuse to approach people. It's just, in my experience, it's just such a wonderful way to travel, and it really gets you connected to a place. So put down the phone, ask people instead of Google, and every time you have an inclination to ask Google or whatever search engine or whatever website, just say, take a pause and say, hey, let me not do this. Let me just ask this exact question to a person instead of to the internet, and just see what happens. See where the trip takes you. I swear you're going to have a much different experience than if you have that sort of isolated research on a screen approach to things. Okay. That's what I got for you today. I mean, I got a load of tips, but I thought this would be a great foundation to share from before you leave, where you're headed, and what to do kind of when you're out there to wrap it up. There you go. Be on the lookout for the next bonus segment. Our road trip planning guide, going to be bringing you 3 outstanding overland trips, bucket list and beyond, giving you some good inspiration and ideas for the coming year. And I want to share one last thank you to the icon of adventure, Defender, for helping me help you plan your next iconic adventure. Defender has been reimagined through thoroughly modern design, but one thing that hasn't changed is Defender's legendary capability off-road and on. It's the ultimate vehicle for road tripping. You can explore the Defender 90, 110, and 130, which has 8 seats, over at LandRoverUSA.com. Thank you to Defender for supporting this special road trip series. Thanks for listening. Woohoo! Here we are at the end of the episode. I got to leave you with a quote now. This one from the Dalai Lama. I mean, even the Dalai Lama loves to travel. He says, quote, "Once a year, go someplace you've never been before." I mean, doesn't get any simpler than that in terms of advice. I mean, I'm saying yes to that. Go someplace I've never been before. All right. Sign me up, Dalai Lama. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this community. Don't forget, we got a free newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. Sign up over there. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.